Okay, awesome. And then we got Gabriella, right? Gabriella, we met a couple weeks ago. You have your own kind of like Q&A session you do with your some people, right?
Yes, I do network with women's real estate investors from Dallas, Texas. But I'm very interested in stepping out of my comfort zone and going into like Wyoming or other states. I'm pretty new. I started in back in August, but I'm really loving the this world of REI. So I'm on my job right now. So I'm like on my 30-minute break. So I
Cool.
coordinated to be here. So thank you, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate
I'm
it.
glad. We'll get started too. That way you're gonna have to. I'm sure you'll have to run back to work. So that's cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, like a lot of people, similar to you, I worked my W-2 job for. I actually just left a year ago, but I was doing the same thing for 10 years, working, hustling on the side, building my
Yeah,
portfolio, and didn't took time, right? But as you build it up, and then you
yeah.
can someday you can do it full time if you really love it.
Of course, that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's cool. And you're in Dallas right now?
No, I'm in California.
Okay,
The network that I actually started with, it's in Dallas, Texas, but I'm in California.
gotcha. Cool, awesome, cool. Well, we can get started. I just want to kind of, and we'll record this too for you guys if you guys want to watch it again, or some other people. I know a lot of people are interested in coming. And I know it's tough during the work day, so we'll definitely record it so anybody can go back and watch this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to title it right now too. So we'll do. Great. Okay, so today, like, I want to review kind of like why cold calling, like how it works in our business, but I really want to highlight kind of to start is like how does cold calling fit in and how it like feeds into our lead manager and feeds into acquisitions and how we actually get contracts and kind of the whole process because starting out, like if you're an investor and you're trying to get deals, like one of the best ways to start out is just getting on the phones, talking to sellers and working through deals, right? That's kind of I think the best kind of entry level into doing deals, unless you can find like somebody to just go analyze their deals for them. That's another way that you could sometimes do it. But the best way to get reps, because you're going to have to talk to other people and you're going to have to negotiate deals. So the best way I found is just to get in and start cold calling. And that's how I started it. And then, but eventually, what we've done is we've now hired cold callers and now we've also hired a lead manager and even got to the point too where we're close to hiring an acquisitions manager to kind of run all those departments. So I'm going to kind of highlight all of them, how they work, at least with our business. So to kind of give you guys a bigger picture of like the whole like our marketing system and our marketing funnel, if you will, we do cold calling, we do texting, we do direct mail, we do Facebook ads, we do the pay per lead services, also like or PPC, and I call them two things, right? There's pay per click, like through Google, and there's also pay per lead. So we do those, and those are the main ones. We've also played around with radio. We do SEO as well. Our website brings in a lot of traffic, but a lot of times the leads that come into our website, they saw us on a Facebook ad or they saw our postcard or heard us on the radio, one of those different ways, and they funnel through our website. That's the one that takes the longest time to really get up and running and really start to see results from. But after a couple of years, the best thing is you start to actually see organic leads coming through. So that's kind of like how we gather the leads, right? But how do we actually like we've got a list of leads. How do we actually capture them and work them, right? So the biggest kind of outbound things are cold calling and texting, right? Texting allows us to go hit out a massive amount of people, but I would say texting is becoming one of the more difficult ones just because of regulations and because of just, yeah, I mean, the biggest part is the regulations, right? And it's also a very competitive space to where a lot of people are texting, right? To me, one of the still most effective ways is if you have a good list and you can get on the phone with these different people, is calling them, right? And what I'm excited about to talk to you guys about is we're really looking for people who want to help us with our cold calling because that's you'll see in our company we've delegated a lot of things to virtual assistants overseas, but cold calling is one that I really want to pilot, trying it with like U.S. based people from sub two, people who have at least know enough to be dangerous, and people who want to be on the phone and want to build rapport. Because I'll get into that a little bit later, like what is important when you do the cold calling, but you really want to have somebody who understands our culture and can really connect with the seller because that's going to go a long way throughout the process. So anyway, that's kind of the best way to like connect with the leads, get them on, start the process for us. So once they go from, again, maybe this lead came from texting or calling or maybe direct mail. But once we find that lead and identify that they are interested in selling, where they go is the next step is they go into our CRM and they go to our lead manager. So my lead manager, she's actually based out of Minnesota. She does all of our, she gets all of our leads, and then the biggest part of her job is she's a filter between every lead and an appointment with me. So she's really good at like getting on the phone and establishing rapport. That's probably one of the best things she does is she builds rapport right away with our sellers, and that makes my job so much easier because and this would be part of cold calling, right? If you could build trust with those people on that first call, that is like so vital, and that makes my job when I come to doing the acquisition and trying to get it under contract makes it so much easier, right? Because I don't have to go spend a lot of people run their companies and a lot of people who are really bootstrapping trying to get started, they're actually going to go to somebody's house and go on an appointment and spend 3 hours building rapport with people sometimes, and that's sometimes the most effective way. I mean, there's no better way to really get deep with somebody and get them to trust you on a deal, but I've had a hard time scaling that, right? It's hard for me to go on all these calls and spend, even if I have to spend an hour building rapport and like getting to know them, what my lead manager helps me is she does a lot of that, right? And I'm hoping cold callers are going to help us with that as well. But really building the rapport is kind of the first and foremost biggest thing you do. So then in addition to building rapport, she's going to actually also start to understand the like details of the house, right? She gives me all these in a notes, right? So the output after, I'm going to go forward a little bit, but what my lead manager gives me before an appointment is, in addition to scheduling me on the appointment, she's going to get like the house size, the bedroom count, what needs work on the house, when it was built. Like we have a big kind of long checklist of everything we want to know about the house, and motivation, right? Number one, if she can uncover motivation, and I don't have to like peel that back from the seller, it allows me to get right into it. Because what I love is when my lead manager books me a call with one of our leads, I can jump right into it, and I'm a kind of type A, move fast, like maximize every minute of the day I got. So I really like it because I can jump into these conversations, and because my lead manager has built so much rapport and got a lot of the like nuts and bolts of what I need, I can jump in and be like, hey, I got a couple options for you. I really want to understand your situation and fit one for you, but like let's jump in. So that allows me to really be effective and go on multiple appointments. Just a little bit about our like metrics. I have my lead manager. Her goal is to book. Let me back up a little bit. I have like an assistant lead manager who also manages a lot of our marketing. He's a VA outside the U.S. His goal is to get 30 leads per week from, again, cold calling, texting, direct mail, all our different marketing channels. His goal is to get 30 leads a week, and then he's going to pass those all off to my lead manager. My lead manager, her goal is to get 15, half of those, we want those to turn into like quality appointments. And again, that's just kind of a KPI we're looking for, but she can't necessarily control if they're motivated, right? But that's her job on that first call, right? Is some people call it a pre-appointment call. I think that's probably the best term to talk about that first phone call with the lead manager. But she's going to qualify them, and her goal is to pass me 15 actually motivated people. And motivation can vary, but that's a really important part is when you go into that call, like how motivated are they? But I'm able to, so then kind of going full circle, my goal is every week is I have 15 conversations with 15 motivated people. So that's what on average 3 a day. So, and sometimes I'll stack. I might do 10 in one day and 10 in another, try to like really stack them up. I would do 6 of them in a day and do 6 times whatever, 3 or 2.5 days, basically. So I want to have as many conversations as I can, but to be able to do those, I really rely on a lead manager. And I guess to kind of go full circle, it really starts with the cold caller, building rapport, understanding the deal, because where I'd really love to go with our company is I'd love to have US-based people making these calls, building rapport, doing a lot of the things that we're doing in the middle step with my lead manager. Because I'll be very transparent with you guys how we do it now. I tell my current VAs that are texting or calling, like I don't want them to go very deep, right? Because they live outside of the US. They don't necessarily understand our culture. I just want them to understand, hey, does this person want to sell in the next 2 to 3 months? If so, then move them on to my lead manager. But with the cold calling people, the benefit of like if I had somebody like from Sub 2 or just somebody else in my network that like knew enough about real estate, again, they don't need to know it all, but if they just know enough that they can go build rapport and start to talk to somebody, and we can give them a script. that's the biggest thing too, is we have scripts for our cold callers, and I'll talk about that in a second, what we do there. But if they could work through that call and start to build rapport, then it's, again, it really could help us kind of skip a step to where, or maybe it saves my lead manager time to where like my cold caller's already built rapport, they've already got all the information they need, they might just pass the lead right to me, which would be pretty cool. But again, the point I was trying to make there was when I'm working with VAs outside of the US, I don't necessarily wanting them going deep, because just you're really trying to build trust with that lead. And if you're a lead, just let's be honest, guys, if you're talking to somebody outside of the US and they're trying to build rapport and sell you something, they're not going to want to open up and really share a whole lot. But that was a long run. I'm going to pause, see if there's any questions so far.
Casey, just want to make the caveat: you're in operating out of Wyoming, Montana, so it's definitely something from your market. I think other operators may benefit from maybe a little more open global connections. So it might be different for other people, but definitely what you've seen in Wyoming, right? In terms of being able to connect with people outside the states.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point, because in our market, and it's kind of why, and I know a couple of you guys are on here. I know Gabriella mentioned it, and other people I've talked to. They're interested in doing markets like Wyoming and Montana. And the reason why I've chose this market is I grew up there, even though I live in Houston, Texas, and I worked here in my W-2 job forever. But I still like investing there because it's my own little niche where I like the competition level. It's not near as competitive as Houston or Phoenix or Las Vegas, right? There's less wholesalers, less buyers. And the other thing I like is I grew up there. I understand how these people work, right? And these people are, again, it's probably like if people grew up in the Midwest or other places like that. They're just very, those people aren't very well versed or well traveled. Like some of them probably never left their hometown. So if you can kind of connect with them, that's huge, right? Being able to just talk about what's going on in their life. Let's kind of go into that. We can kind of talk about the scripts, right? So typically, if we're doing a cold call, again, we've got all this outline, a script, but really it's you're about getting on there, just building rapport. We've got some kind of icebreakers to where because that's the first kind of line. The first part of the call is where a lot of times you're either going to get hung up on, but if you kind of get past that first little shock and get into them and ask them a couple questions, then you can get the conversation going. And really, it's all about asking open-ended questions and getting them talking about their property, right? And then where you really get successful, and this is really sales 101, right? This is what makes me good in acquisitions, is if I can get them talking, then I can be thinking and steering the conversation where I want to go, right? I don't love, right now I'm having to do all the talking. I'd rather be listening and figuring out where I'm going to go next. So the big thing when you're cold calling is being able to ask the right questions, get them talking, because then you can kind of steer the conversation where you want it to go. So that's kind of the biggest one, is kind of breaking the ice, getting in the conversation. And then, like I said, it's building rapport throughout the conversations. Anytime you can be asking them personal questions, understanding what makes them tick, what's important to them. I don't have the exact acronym, but I got a really good acronym where it talks about the important things you want to cover, and whether it's friends and family, sports, different things that you can talk to, people or animals, travel. There's a bunch of different ones you can connect on. And if you could hit on one of those, that's a big piece of it. And then the second thing is, if you can get this deep, and again, I don't like our VAs to go this deep. I kept them off here, but I would, a US based person that understood real estate, I would love for them to go into what's the motivation? Why are they wanting to sell? And then the further you can dig into that's the gold, right? It's hey, why are they selling? What is the reasoning, right? And this understanding their motivation. Because once you understand that, then we can really start to play to that. And if we typically don't have our initial cold callers start to talk price, but if you can open up that door of once you've understood their motivation, because then the way I frame it up typically is hey, what do you need out of this? Say you need to sell, how much cash do you need? So again, this parlays perfectly into sub 2. A big way to kind of really unwind or really kick off the conversation with sub 2 is thinking about, hey, how much money do you need for this? So a phrase I like to say that's a little bit, it's not too invasive. And honestly, it's kind of assumptive. So I'll ask him, hey, so a lot of the things, before I've kind of pitched sub 2, I'll say, hey, when you sell this house, do you need all the cash right now? Like, do you have to? And I'll know the situation, right? I'll know if they need to pay off debt, then I'm going to play to that. But a lot of times, if I know it's somebody who's maybe a little more, maybe they have a lot of assets, or I could tell that they don't have a bunch of debt. The way I'll frame it up is I'll say, hey, when you sell this house, um, assuming you don't need all this money for credit card debt or to go pay off a loan, or I mean, do you have to go spend it, or do you need to spend it? And it's kind of funny psychologically. People are like, no, I don't need all the money. Like, I'm fine. I'm set. I'm doing good. So that's a really good way to tee it up for me for creative finance, right? Because that big part of like negotiating a sub two or a hybrid or any type of seller finance deal is the big thing, the big box we need to check is we need to make sure that they don't need all that money at a closing. Because if they don't need all the money, that's where we can get creative, and we could do a seller carry. We could do like a hybrid deal where we take over their loan and then we make payments on their equity. But the key is they don't need all the money. So that's one really cool one I try to uncover when I'm first talking. And I definitely wouldn't recommend going that deep on the first call if you're cold calling. But I mean, if you build rapport and get to talking to these guys, by just asking them motivation, you're really going to start to. That's where you can take it to the next level on these conversations. I'm going to pause for a second, catch my breath. Any questions?
Casey, if you have time, it'd be awesome if you could go back to when you first started your career in cold calling. And I know you've shared some big tips that have been effective for you recently, but maybe you kind of put yourself in the headspace of going back to early on in your portfolio when you're adding your first couple of properties and you're cold calling sellers. That'd be kind of cool to hear a little bit of your perspective back then and how that's changed over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. And then and here in about 5 minutes, Tom Hurley's going to hop on and we're going to go over his deal. He's going to share it with us, and it'll be kind of cool for you guys to break down a deal. And if you guys want to ask questions on a deal after that, you're more than welcome to. But yeah, so when I first started cold calling, you know what the biggest epiphany I've had is like, I just wanted to talk to leads, right? Like I'm thinking this was like 5-6 years ago. And what the first thing I did is I went in a market where I was in Laramie, Wyoming, and I knew that it was like middle of the semester. So I'm thinking if anything's listed for rent right now, it was the middle of the summer. So I'm like, if anything is listed for rent, there's probably something wrong with this property, because properties go super fast in this market and they go like nothing stays on the market. Right? So there's something wrong with this house. So we were just I had some interns trying to go find these properties and get me on the phone with them. So then I would go cold call these people who had their house listed for rent. I'd be like, hey, rather than renting this thing, would you sell it? But I just remember back then, like I just wanted to get on the phones, and it was like, how do I create a system where I can get leads? Because when you're cold calling, you just want to be talking to people who actually want to sell. And at that point, I was just trying to find people who wanted to sell. So one of the biggest things I've done is like trying to figure out, hey, and it's why I've invested so much money into marketing, to where now I've got 15 appointments being booked by my lead manager every week with people who actually want to talk about selling. And that's the really cool thing that definitely I had to pinch myself a while back. It's like, man, there's been a lot of hard work and at times this is stressful, but the fact that I get to talk to 15 different people who actually want to sell is a really cool thing. But as far as tips and like kind of like, or more so like starting out, I remember it's not comfortable. You just get on there. And I learned all my system through the REI Game Changers. So they've got a pretty cool mastermind. That's how I learned how to wholesale. And I just remember going through their trainings and just started going. And I mean, again, I just had a script and I would just start to talk to people, and it was awkward and it wasn't great. But as I did, the more and more reps I got, the more I could like get confident in talking about it. And the cool thing is, I mean, it's all about reps. Every conversation you have, you learn more, right? And then you're going to be more prepared. And eventually your mind gets good at like, it's all about understanding patterns, right? You'll recognize patterns of people where you're like, ooh, I can kind of see based on what this person is telling me, I've seen this before and this is the way to navigate it and go. So it's going to be awkward and it's going to be clunky at first, and you're going to get a lot of people are going to be really mean to you, but as long as you had set that expectation that that's going to happen, but you're in this to get better and you want to keep doing it, eventually you'll get really good and you'll like it. And now I love it because I can just, like one thing I do is I actually, during the summertime, I like to go down to the pool with my little, like I have a 1-year-old baby. So I like to get him out of the house and give my wife a break, and we'll go down there. And then that's when I'll do my seller appointment calls, because I can have my headphones on. I feel good because you're like out in the sun, and like just sunlight is good for your like psyche and everything. And so anyway, I like being out in the heat or in the sun, and I get to make my calls, right? And I just get to talk to people, and it's really fun because I can just, it's become so natural with me now. I just want to get on the phone with these guys, and I can just start navigating the conversation just based on what they tell me. And anyway, it just becomes really easy, and then it becomes fun. It's not, at one point, once you really get used to it and really and start to get good at it, it becomes very fun. And and then you get confidence, right? Once you close some deals and once you do well, you're like, man, I'm actually good at this, and it feels good. So anyway, that's kind of the evolution.
That's awesome. I know we're here at Mid-Mark at 2:30 here Central for Tom's deep dive on the deal. It'd also be kind of cool if you were able to share. I know you mentioned that it kind of starts off clunky or a little awkward, but towards the end maybe of the webinar, you could share a little bit more about how you're solving people's problems, finding solutions for home sellers, homeowners, where really they may not have anywhere else to go. So instead of them giving you what you want as a home buyer, you're actually helping them as a home seller. So that'd be kind of cool as well. But I'm excited about Tom Hurley's deal dive.
Yeah. Let's do this first. I'm sure Tom would love to hear it. Yeah. So it's all about. Yeah, I mean, it's just a mindset shift, right? When you're talking to these people, you don't have to feel like you're this slimy wholesaler, this guy that's just trying to buy their house for pennies on the dollar, right? A lot of people think that that's what everyone thinks of them. But if you approach it, and I've gotten feedback from people that love this, right? Like, I'm trying to understand their situation so I can help. And if you're just transparent and upfront with people, be like, hey, like, obviously I got to do this. I'm making a profit. Otherwise, I just be honest with people, be like, this feeds my family and I have to make money on this. But like, if you can tell me your situation, I can figure out a solution. And the benefit you guys have is if you're part of Sub 2 or you understand creative finance, like you have a whole tool belt that most other people don't. And it's going to separate you from most other people who are calling that all they can do is just give them all they know is a formula. I'm going to offer this. I know what the value is. I got to estimate repairs, and I'm going to do 70% of that, and I'm going to take off $10,000 for a wholesale fee and minus repairs, and that's what I'm going to offer. And that's the only thing they can do, right? But you guys who understand Sub 2 and creative finance, you can go deep, and you can be like, hey, what do you need out of this? Do you need all the money right now in 2 weeks? Or if I paid you over time? Or if I could get you even more money and we spread this out over 5 years, which would be kind of cool. We're going to talk about Tom's deal is like that. And you can spread it out over time. Like, would that work for you? But again, it's all about solving their problem and understanding that. And if you approach the conversation like, hey, I'm here to help solve your problem, and people will understand that, right? If you, based on the way you ask questions, and well, honestly, it's intuitive, right? If you're just curious, asking them like, hey, how can I help you? How can we solve this situation together, and really try to approach it from the same side of the table, people will notice that. And you guys might feel like it's difficult to do that, but it's really not. It's just, if you ask the questions and get them to, it's all about peeling back the onion, right? Once you get them to explain their motivation and where they're at, then you start to build their trust, then you can solve a problem. And that's the key to creative finance. You got to be able to understand their problem, and then the last piece is you just got to do enough deals and understand how to solve the problem, right? At least I have the luxury of, I've been pitching creative finance for a long time, ever since I read Brandon Turner's book on how to buy properties with no money down. And this was like 8 years ago. And so, because I was like, hey, how do I buy more properties without having to put 20% down every time? And I read that book. And so I've been kind of pitching this off and on for a while. But I mean, what took it to the next level was joining Sub 2. And then I was able to get even better at it. And then the last thing is just doing it all the time. So as you do it more and more, you'll get better. You'll be able to understand people's issues. Because what you want to do is you want to have a bunch of different ways to solve them, right? And then I'm happy to help you guys if you ever have questions on like, hey, I got this situation, I'm not quite sure to solve it. That's probably going to be your hardest thing right now, and it's going to take you the longest amount of time, is understanding, hey, what's the solution to the problem? But if you're good at just understanding, hey, what's the problem, and getting them to tell you that, then that's a huge win. We can really, somebody like me or somebody that does this all the time can help you solve it. Cool. And last thing is, I didn't quite go full circle on I talked about cold calling to lead manager booking appointments to me negotiating getting stuff on contract, right? So I mentioned that I've got 15 appointments I'm targeting. My goal is to actually do 2 contracts per week. So I'm trying to get 2 properties under contract every week for the next year. And what that looks like is I talk to them, and at that point, a lot of times we send an LOI, which works really well. It's a letter of intent, and it's been really effective for us because it's not this overwhelming 4-page document that they got to sign. It's just a simple, hey, here's a quick LOI, and that's a really good way for us to get feedback on, hey, where are we at? And one thing I like to do is I like to give them 2 offers in that LOI. That way they can compare and contrast, like, hey, here's 1 and here's 2. That's just a good way to like get some feedback and not have it be like a hard no. Then people like options, right? Then they can kind of pick one and tweak it. So we always like to send an LOI, and then that really gets us going back and forth. Because in our market, we just don't find a lot of people that are like, I want to sell, and I want to sell for this price, and I want to sell in 2 weeks, or I got to sell in 2 weeks. It's more like they're trying to feel you out. Both sides are just trying to find that win-win. So the LOI helps get that conversation started, and then after the LOI, once we've kind of got an agreement on terms, that's when we'll go and we'll schedule a meeting to go through the contract and get it signed, and then we're off and running. Any other questions before we get into the Tom's deal? All right, I'm going to